Welcome to Four Guys Talking About AI. I'm here with my good friends, Greg Sterling, Neil Polachek, and John Gerard. And we're going to talk today a little bit about AI and how AI is transforming the marketing space and how it's helping small businesses grow, how agencies and publishers are utilizing AI and where the opportunities are for those companies. We're going to talk a little bit about news in the market and things that are happening, applications of this news, ways that businesses are adopting AI technology, different use cases for how small businesses are using AI. We're going to jump into some stats and surveys that both Greg and Neil have done with small businesses, and hopefully this becomes a really interesting, educational, and fun podcast for y'all. So welcome aboard, everybody. We're really excited about putting this podcast together for you. So let's get started. Guys, what's new and interesting that was popping this week for y'all?
I am continually surprised, just as much as I was when the first ChatGPT thing came out. I mean, that was the thing that kind of blew all of our minds. And I've had that happen like 6 or 7 more times since then, including twice in the last month. So I'm excited to chat a little bit about that.
Nice. Like what? Give me an example. Like what's?
I'll tell you what, I mean, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about this a little bit later on, but you know, there was some stuff that happened in the music space. Andy, you and I talked about it at UDO, where some songs are getting created text to song, right? So you just put in a prompt around what you want the song to be, and it is extraordinarily good. Now, I'm not the kind of musician you are, Andy. Like you would actually be the one to say like this is actually good music. To my ear, as a very amateur musician, it's unbelievable. And you know, the lyrics are right, the rhythm, the timing, the instrumentation, the styles, like that absolutely had my jaw on the floor.
Totally agree with you. That was pretty wild. I don't know if Greg, I don't know, Neil, if you guys have checked out UDO yet, but it's a mind blower.
I haven't used that one in particular. I've used the one from the Stable Diffusion people. And I agree that the at least in that experience, the capabilities of these things are really remarkable, but at the same time, it's just not generally as good as a talented human would create. I mean, as something for background music or a kind of a innocuous soundtrack or just some interstitial music, it's amazing. So the idea that you can describe something the same way as image generation is totally amazing. I continue to be completely amazed by image generation. You can just describe something and then it shows up, and these images are getting better and better, and the music will get better and better. I mean, it's kind of magic, you know, in a way that technology really hasn't been for me in the past. So it's pretty amazing.
Very cool. What's something that blew your mind this week, Greg, with in the world of AI?
The way in which ChatGPT is such a useful tool is amazing. You know, how I have integrated it into really my daily routines. You know, whether it's, you know, reading news or analyzing spreadsheets or creating images for blog posts, it's just become so quickly in the last year, really such a routine part of my workday, and my corresponding Google usage has diminished. That is kind of a remarkable thing for me to reflect on, how quickly I've adopted something, how useful it is, and how much it's displaced something else. I mean, I'm using other tools, Perplexity and now Meta AI and Claude and some of the others, Gemini, but really ChatGPT is the one that I continue to use.
I'd echo what Greg is saying. And, you know, as Greg and I sort of embark on the program we're building, just our ability to use ChatGPT to build charts and data out of our spreadsheet that's got 1,000 rows and 47 columns, and do it as efficiently, as correctly, and as quickly as it does, it really changes our whole business model. Because in the past, we would have had to hire somebody or spend, you know, multiple hours crunching through the data and putting it into tables and charts. And for us, that's real. I mean, that's real leverage. And as we think about this local space and these these local businesses, their biggest challenge is often finding people who can help them run their business. And to the extent that these tools are going to start to enable that, it really is got some really significant opportunities for local businesses. As I was telling the guys before we started recording, I was just in Japan and talking to the tour guides that, they're always asking, well, what do you do? This was a small tour. It was just 4 of us. And I was saying, well, I'm playing around with this AI stuff. And they're talking to me about how they're using it to plan itineraries for their guests. So this thing's happening all over in places that you wouldn't expect it to happen. And while I was there, I read something where I think it's Microsoft or somebody who just launched, a further version in Japanese for that population. So all these things are starting to, I'm starting to see evidence of this play out in common places all over the place. That's what's blowing my mind, frankly.
I just was going to echo that and say, I'm really used to being on the bleeding edge in terms of technology adoption. Like I adopt way too early almost all the time. And I've been just blown away by how expansive and extensive the adoption is, so I'm talking like you, talking to, a friend who owns restaurants and is franchising those out, would not consider himself a technologist, uses ChatGPT every day. Talking to my kids, college age and late high school age, of course, it's incredibly disruptive in education. They're using it every day, and would not consider them to be super technology oriented. So it's really kind of wild to see the spectrum and sort of all ages, all professions, all levels of tech aptitude. It's that part is really mind blowing.
One of the really interesting things about this, and I think why we're seeing so much kind of organic adoption, is the way in which the interface and the user experience is so intuitive. I mean, you've got people who are writing code. Some huge percentage of code that's being written is now being done with AI tools. And so you've got people who are super technical that are using it in that way. And then you've got people who are, doing English homework or, just very relatively mundane things with the same tool, which makes it really sort of almost unique. Yeah, and almost unique as a piece of software, right? And so a lot of the business owners that we talked about, we'll get into this a little bit later, have done the same kind of thing that you described, John, where they've discovered use cases on their own, and they're finding intrinsic value that they're just kind of stumbling around, and they don't even know half of the things that you can do with it. I've talked to people and said, hey, you can upload a spreadsheet and do this and that and the other. You can find out which of your customers are, the most valuable and how much they're spending. And, if you have this data, you can do all kinds of interesting things with it. And so they don't know a lot of the use cases, but they're figuring them out, kind of on their own instinctively, which is sort of how Google established itself, but in a more limited way, right? It's like Google was very simple to use. The complexity was hidden from people. And so everybody adopted it, was this great tool. This is even more so in some respects.
That also reminds me of, everybody's had their first experience with ChatGPT or one of these other tools that is so mind blowing that, it kind of makes you pause and just try to collect yourself and gather, what you've just seen. and we really like to blow one another's minds, right? So I wonder, like the part of the viral aspect here is I really want to show other people this crazy, insane experience that I just had and have them have that same experience. And so, to your point, as people are figuring out new ways to use this stuff, like the first, instinct for most people or many people is going to be, I want to show my friend this and show how, this amazing experience. I want to share this with somebody because it's so crazy. I can hardly believe it. And I suspect that has really helped to perpetuate things quickly as well.
Yeah. Well, let's do something before we kind of proceed, because I know you wanted to talk about, sort of do some definitions or kind of demystify AI a little bit. everybody's talking about AI. AI is everywhere, and certainly in the technology industry, and then in the broader culture, there's a lot of discussion. SNL had that skit. I don't know if you guys watched it, Beavis and Butthead skit. That was a very popular, very viral skit, and the idea that there was a sort of the skit was built around an interview about the societal impact of AI, and then they had these characters in the background that kind of distracted the speaker. So that's a reflection of the degree to which it's in the culture now. So if you're at a cocktail party, John, I'm some person that doesn't know anything about these technologies, and I come up to you and say, hey, what do you do? And then we get into this conversation, and I ask you, well, what is this AI really? I've heard a little bit about it, but I don't really understand what it is. How can you give me the cocktail party version of that, or
Sure.
or a deeper version if you want?
Absolutely. Well, so the way that I tend to think about it and describe it to people is that AI is a quest to build technology that approximates human intelligence. So that's it, kind of very, very simply stated. It's an approach in developing mostly software, although a lot of hardware is involved these days now as well, that allows machines to solve problems that were previously the domain of only humans. So we see that kind of popping up now in a lot of the generative AI. Like it was only recently that a machine could do a pretty good job of painting something that looked like it was created by a human artist. We're talking about ChatGPT as well. So that's kind of the general definition. It actually, when you go a layer deeper than that, it's a little more complicated for a lot of reasons. One of them is, if you ask a biologist what intelligence is, they have a hard time giving you a straight answer. So we're not even really sure what intelligence is, which makes defining a term like artificial intelligence, a little bit thorny. But for the purposes of this conversation, really, conversations that people are having out there, the idea is, can we build technology that does things that were previously only the domain of humans, that approximate human intelligence in their behavior? And that goes all the way back to the early days of AI, back in the 50s. You guys may know Alan Turing. He was a famous mathematician, cryptographer, brilliant guy, really father of modern computing. He's the one that the term the Turing test comes from. And for those of you who don't know what the Turing test is, it was basically the sort of subjective bar related to how can we tell if a machine has become intelligent. And the test is simply, if a human is interacting sort of blindly with a machine, so say just through a keyboard and a monitor, and is not able to distinguish a machine's responses from a human's, meaning they can't accurately tell whether they're interacting with a human or a machine, then that machine is said to have passed the Turing test and to therefore be intelligent. That's actually what's interesting about that is that test, many half a century ago, kind of first created more than half a century ago, is still sort of the gold standard in have we done it yet, and is still talked about a lot in AI circles. And frankly, I think we're kind of right there where it's actually unfolding in front of us.
The ChatGPT mobile app has a voice component to it. You don't get that on the desktop so much. We've had these smart speakers, we've had Siri, we've had Google Assistant, and they sort of sound like people, but not exactly, right? They're sort of talking to you in a natural cadence, but they don't quite sound authentically human. But the ChatGPT voice and some of the other new voice artificial voices that are being created are really human sounding in ways that are kind of unprecedented. And so if you interact with the machine in that context, it's much more likely that you won't necessarily be deceived into thinking that this is a human that you're talking to, but it will feel much more like a human. And I notice in my interactions with ChatGPT, just even on the desktop, right? I interact with it in a very different way than Google search, right? In Google search, you do, whatever, restaurants, New York, or population of adults, United States, some truncated language just to get the answer quickly. With ChatGPT, it's a much, or with some of the other tools, it's a much more conversational interaction. You ask follow-up questions. What about this? There's context. And I find myself saying, I do this sort of half self-mockingly and half sincerely, thanks ChatGPT at the conclusion of
Right.
some activity, and
Yeah.
it's almost an instinctive response to what's going on, and I reflect on that and I think, wow, that's kind of interesting / weird, even though I'm semi self-conscious about it.
Well, Greg,
So
as I was building those charts a while back, I was telling it thank you, and then I would say, well, now would you please try and do this? That's
right.
a uniquely different way of interacting with the machine than what we did a year ago. And that's where I think all this really starts to thrust itself pervasively in the marketplace. Because if you can have a conversation with it in that way, then and one of the things that we saw in some of the data, Greg, was that the notion of, let's say you're a local business, you have some technicians whose first language is not English. And now they can actually use these machines to help them over that hump of having that hesitancy or lack of confidence using the English language. They can have the machine do it. So the use cases that we can think about, we'll do that throughout these podcasts. But we're just scratching the surface, and our mind is blown. That's what's crazy to me. We're really just scratching the surface, and it's kind of blowing all our minds.
Yeah, this accelerated environment is so interesting. And Neil, you said the magic word to me earlier, which is leverage for small businesses or for agencies and publishers. It's about leveraging this technology so that you get more done in a shorter period of time, faster, cheaper, right? And it's these benefits get passed on to especially a small business that's always starved for resources and time. So interesting use cases, and the interaction part that you all just mentioned. I came across this technology this week, another one that blew my mind. It's called VAPI, VAPI. It's an API platform for voice. So imagine instead of an IVR kind of scenario, when you call into a business, press 1 for this, press 2 for that. It's an AI that answers the phone and in a conversational kind of way, just like you said, thank you and please, and these kinds of things. You're speaking to this in natural language, just like you would speak to a person, and it's responding back with whatever, let me route your call to wherever it needs to go to. Or if you have a question, it might just answer it right back to you. And the training of this platform is really easy because any business can take recordings of their calls. So let's say they have a VoIP platform and they can record calls. You can take all of your call recordings, dump it into this thing, and it will learn how to respond to those conversations just based on those recordings. Immediately, you have this intelligent voice assistant that's answering your phones, routing your calls, maybe even scheduling clients for you. Or if maybe does outbound calling as well to prospects instead of having people do the stuff. It can do an outbound call when it connects with somebody. It can have a qualifying conversation and then pass it back to a live person so that you can get that leverage effect. I thought that kind of blew my mind.
Andy, it reminds me, and you guys probably remember Keen.
Yeah.
Remember that was the you dialed in. I don't know how you got in there. Maybe it was online, and then you could get a therapist, right, to talk to you. I mean, as you were speaking there, I was thinking about the therapist that's now a machine that can. I'm sort of speechless.
It's happening.
Because
have you checked out Pi? Do you know that AI, IPI? It's very cool. It's very conversational. People are using it as a therapist or as a friend. It's a fascinating expression of AI. It's very conversational, in a little bit of a different way than Perplexity or Claude or ChatGPT. It prompts you with lots of questions as the person using it. So through that experience, you end up spending a lot more time with it than you would if you just have a single question, you're asking it just like you might a Google search. Very different experience.
So a couple of quick responses. So the whole therapy conversation is really fascinating. This is a discussion in and of itself, so I won't digress too far on this, but the idea that you can use, I mean, and there are a number of therapy oriented sort of AI tools already. The idea that you could for a relatively low cost have some version of therapy that is beneficial to you, and there are a lot of ethical issues, is really amazing and very disruptive of the profession, right? Because fees are going way up, and so therapy is becoming for human therapists less and less accessible for people, but arguably more people need it than ever given all the mental health issues. So this really represents an opportunity at the sort of lower end of the market, and is potentially disruptive of, maybe what you get is bifurcation of the market, right? So high hourly rates for a small number of people, and then most people are turning to some sort of machine or machine with human assist or something. But I wanted to go back to your VAPI thing. Two points there that are really interesting. One is this kind of natural language interaction with call centers or customer care has long been promised but not delivered, right? The companies, and I can't even remember them. I did some work with a company that did a lot of work in that area a number of years ago, and you were supposed to just be able to initiate a conversation, and then it would figure out what you were talking about and then route you accordingly. And it never worked, really pretty rarely worked. And so invariably what you did is you said, it would be like, hi, Greg, tell me a little bit about your problem. And then within 10 or 15 seconds, it was like live agent, and, and these tools now do hold out the promise of resolving a lot of those things without having to go to a live agent, which the providers don't want you to do anyway. And then, the other thing, Andy, that's remarkable about this technology in general is the idea that you could just take data, right, from any domain and put it in, and there's this learning capability that then makes it able to answer a bunch of questions or give you information about that area of expertise. And you don't have to really, there's this sort of feedback loop, right? The training piece of it, but you don't have to reconfigure the software to handle that. It
Right.
can literally work across any domain, hypothetically, right? So you put your own data in it, it'll answer questions about your customers. You put the writings of Karl Marx into it, and it'll answer questions about, why capitalism is evil or whatever. And it's just that flexibility is amazing. And people don't really know how it works.
Right.
This is the really mind-blowing thing of maybe at the meta level, is that, you get into the weeds like, well, how does this work? And people will tell you, well, it's about predicting the next word in the sequence based on this sort of, body of information that has been fed into it. But if you ask people, they don't really understand how this works at a basic level.
Yeah. I think even more to the point, we can't understand based on the way that the LLMs in particular are architected. So the large learning models or language models, the way that they work is with sort of stacked neural networks. Maybe we'll talk about that later. Maybe we won't. But there's stuff that goes on in the middle of those networks, of those neural networks, that we by sort of definitionally can't peer in and see what's happening. So what that means in practice is you can't ask ChatGPT, well, how did you come up with that? Like, where did that piece of information that you just, spat out at me, like, where did that come from? Because it is actually not even able to introspect and give you an answer to that. Something else I want to mention here, these are such incredible examples, everything we've talked about so far, and actually sort of quintessential examples of what it would mean to have technology that does things that was prior only the domain of humans. Greg, you used the phrase, I've never heard this before, human therapist. Like, you had to qualify that this therapist, we just say therapist, don't we? No. Now we have to qualify that this is a human therapist, because there are, or soon will be, non-human therapists. Like, that sort of gives a sense of, our language is even needing to change to adjust to this. So this idea that, like, everything that we've talked about so far is mind-blowing, at least in part because this was the domain of humans and is now being encroached on very, very quickly. And I think another thing we'll probably be talking about a lot in upcoming episodes is that disruption. All these sort of very human things that we do and have sort of considered to be the realm of humanity are that list is getting shorter of things that only humans can do. And so what does that mean? And how do we deal with the inevitable disruption, and how do you leverage it for benefit, so that you don't yourself get disrupted? Really, really big and important questions.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the research that you guys did, Neil and Greg, because I think that what's interesting about that, my initial takeaway from that was, what is the climate for small businesses, and what are they thinking about AI? How they might be able to leverage AI? What's interesting to them, and how is that an opportunity for publishers and agencies to bring solutions to them? So maybe let's transition into that conversation a little bit, because it takes it from this theoretical kind of level down to the street level, and get into some real world applications.
We looked at a bunch of data, and even some of the data we looked at yesterday from Constant Contact, as well as the data that Greg and I have been generating on our own through surveys and through conversations. A lot of this is around the marketing stuff, and they can't get to building communications because they don't have resources. Maybe they don't have the scale to go to an agency. I think where, frankly, publishers and providers can help them is to teach them how to use this thing. But isn't that, but if you think about that, let me teach you how to use this machine, whatever one you want to call it, ChatGPT, so that you disintermediate me, your current agency. That's a conundrum, isn't it? But if you look at the data that we've been looking at, that's where the real demand is helping them. A lot of it's around digital marketing, how to write copy, how to do marketing messages, how to tell the machine, the CRM, hey, create a promotion for my top 10% best customers, which it could do pretty quickly. Now, but teaching them how to do that and teaching them the prompts so that it does it right would be hugely valuable to them as the end user. But what does that mean for that provider? And what is that going to look like? And how is the business model going to have to change so that provider stays relevant and valuable in the equation? I think is as big a question out there as there is for these local businesses.
Let me throw in a couple of just quick data points for some context. So we did a survey at the end of December and the beginning of January with 1,000 U.S. small businesses, qualified decision makers, and echoing what Neil is saying, what we found is overwhelmingly they were much more excited about AI than concerned about it. So approaching 90% of them are more excited than they are concerned. It's a minority that have these kind of concerns. I mean, John, to your earlier point, I think it's the people that are the insiders, the white collar workers, the people that are more familiar with AI use cases that are nervous, and picking up on what Neil said, some of the agencies. I mean, Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, which is the parent of ChatGPT, said sort of, maybe in a kind of a moment of overreaching, that 95% or something approaching that of what agencies do today will be done by AI. But the marketing use case is the first use case on the minds of the small businesses because their number one business challenge is acquiring customers. But I think they envision what our survey data and our conversations reveal is that they're thinking more broadly also about AI. But marketing is the most immediate use case. Like, how do I create content? How do I create client communications? How do I do customer service? How do I write ad copy? How do I write blog posts? Something that you're really familiar with, Andy, with you and John, with your platform. But they're mostly bullish on it. Overwhelmingly, ChatGPT is the thing that they're most familiar with. And a surprising number of them told us in the survey that they're testing it or using it today. So 60% said we're either using it today actively or we're testing it. Now, surveys always have to be taken with a grain of salt because people want to put their best foot forward in surveys, or they give you the should answer. But there's other surveys in the market that confirm that directionally. So this is, as I was saying before we started, this is a remarkable moment because I don't think in the small business market has there ever been a technology that where the business owners have been out in front of the marketers, the SaaS companies, right? Their adoption is organic. I mean, to the point about the viral promotion earlier, and they don't have to be. They need to be educated on how to operationalize it, how to integrate it into their daily activities to some degree, but they see it as valuable and they instinctively know this is going to be helpful to them. And that's unique and really amazing. I mean, we spent 15 years telling people why they had to be in search results, or why social media was important, or why email
or
marketing.
why they had to have a CRM platform, which was confusing and difficult to use. And one of the data points in our data, Greg, if you remember, is that a lot of what they're hoping for is that these AI solutions or this AI stuff makes it easier for them to implement and use that software. So if I'm a software provider to that marketplace today, I'm hoping I'm spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to make an interface that is so easy to use, so easy to set this thing up. I can say, hey, give me my 10 best customers and write a piece of copy to do a promotion for them inside of that tool. Because if you don't do that for that small business customer, they're going to go and find another solution that will do it.
Let me add one more thing, and then you guys who are in sort of a direct, you're in the position of you're a software company working with publishers. So you guys, I think, have a very first person perspective on this. But let me say one more thing that piggybacks on what Neil says and sort of is a segue into your comments. What I'm discovering, and I think this has always been true, but I'm really seeing it firsthand in some of these discussions we're having with small businesses, is they don't have anywhere to go for information and education that they can trust. There's a lot of companies selling stuff to them. There's a lot of people pitching them. There's a lot of people coming at them, but there are very few trustworthy sources that they can just turn to and get real information. And they're very hungry for that. And they're very skeptical of a lot of the inbound stuff that they're receiving, the marketing messages, the promotions. This is a moment where they really are hungry for education and useful information and genuine help. And there aren't a lot of places for them to go.
It's such a good point. And we talk a lot with our clients about the need to be able to create content, useful content for your customers, whatever vertical you're in, right? So if you're a local business, for example, part of your job from a marketing standpoint is to ask the question and answer it and help people, learn from your expertise. Doing that is a great marketing strategy, it turns out. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone by doing that. And in any of this environment to learn more about AI, there's, like you said, there's a huge appetite to do that. Ways that companies who I think are going to be leaders in this space, they're by offering useful information and breadcrumbs and pathways to be able to say, here's how you do it, and pulling back the curtain and saying, let me be your trusted advisor in this moment and through this process. More than ever, it's a give to get, kind of economy. And so the more you lean into that, and the more that you are able to offer value tactically, how do I do this stuff? The more you're going to earn the trust of those prospects, because it cuts through a lot of the noise that's in the market. You're giving them a real solution to a problem that they have. So we see this a lot in content marketing with Composer and what we're doing there, but also other companies. There's a company I came across this week called Marbleism. Really interesting platform. It's a AI application creator. So text prompts, create me an app that does X, Y, and Z, and it'll actually code it up for you. Right. So we're getting to that level where you can create an app in minutes. It can be a mobile app, can be a web app, but it creates the front end and the back end and a database all in one shot. So what they do is that they have lots of webinars and courses around how do you do this kind of stuff, and companies that really lean into that to kind of demystify how do you use these tools, I think are the ones that are going to earn the trust of their customers and develop that long relationship with them.
But Andy, or not, and can't ChatGPT in some ways be that trusted advisor?
People still want humans. People still want humans. That's what our research overwhelmingly showed. They want video calls, they want phone calls, they want access to people. When it comes to support and onboarding and learning, they still want humans. And
but
ChatGPT,
that's because there hasn't been a machine that could do what a human could do. If the machine can start to do that, Greg, they may go, you know what? I can just ask this machine here. I don't think we're there yet, but I think, it's possible.
I would rather talk to a machine, even at the current levels of capability, than most of the chat support reps that are overseas handling my current bank account.
Well, that's a whole other conversation. So John, I think we've I think opened the door to a lot of future discussions about a lot of really interesting topics, and we've sort of scratched the surface, as they say, on things. But I think we're at the end of our inaugural session here. Why don't you give us the final word for today, and we'll look forward to many more of these.
Fantastic. Well, look, it's been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed myself, and I could tell already we could go for another few hours, but probably shouldn't do that today. I think what I'm getting out of this, especially as we're wrapping this one up, is this question about disruption. And I know that's going to be a major theme in everything we talk about going forward, especially if you're an agency owner and you are actively being disrupted by these tools right now. Disrupt or be disrupted. What does that mean in this context? And actually, I think there's some good answers to that. I think we actually have a little tiny bit of precedent with prior cycles of disruptive technology. There have been certain disruptive technologies that spell the end of an industry, and there have been others that actually are embraced by that same industry and turn into a 10x, 100x, 1000x improvement or growth for that industry. And I think that there's cases to be made for both of those in the current cycle and environment for industries in AI. And I hope we get a chance to talk about that in upcoming shows.
All right. On that suspenseful note, Andy, why don't you take us out and tell us what the folks have to look forward to in the coming weeks?
Yeah, so a lot more of what we just talked about. I think what we'll start doing is getting more granular about each one of these topics and digging into where there are opportunities for small businesses to be able to leverage AI, peel back some of the complexities of what is happening in the market to simplify this and make it accessible, get tactical about these things, right? So there's very high level conversations that are easy to go long in. But I think for us, we're going to get tactical about how do publishers and agencies leverage AI in their workflow and how does that benefit the small business? And I'm excited about digging into that.
We're gonna put all these tools and technologies and a bunch of cool links in show notes for people to check out as well.
All right, please join us next week for more exciting adventures.
All right, thanks so much.